everyone, my name is Minan Christian Talabok, a grade 12 STEM student. So today I will going to discuss about variable. Variable is changing qualities or characteristics of person or things like age, gender, intelligence, ideas, achievement, confidence, and so on that are involved in your research study. Made up of base word vary, which means to undergo changes on differ from variables have different or varying values in relation to time and situation. Is any characteristics, number or quantity that can be measured or counted. In research, variables are any characteristics that can take on different values such as height, age, temperature, or test score. Researchers often manipulate or measure independent and dependent variables in study to test cause and effect relationship. In research, especially in qualitative research, one important thing you have to focus on at the start of your study is to determine the variables involved in your study. Unless you spend some time pondering on variables in your research, your work has no chance of attaining its goal. Your research problem or research topic, to which you devote much of your initial research time finalizing stands great. It has wordings on the basic variables involved in your study. Basically, variables have two types, independent variable and dependent variables. Independent variables are those that cause changes in subject, and independent variables is the variable you manipulate, control, or vary in experimental study to explore its effect. It's called independent because it's not influenced by other variables in the study. Independent variables are also called explanatory variables, while dependent variables is the variable that depends on other factors that are measured. These variables are expected to change as a result of an experimental manipulation of the independent variable or variables. For example, you want to see the effect of studying or sleeping on a test score. In the example, the score is the dependent variable. Studying or sleeping is the independent variable because these factors impact how much student scores on the test.
Good day everyone. I am Novi Archiliones, a grade 12 STEM student. Variable relationships and other types of variables.
A few moments later.
Variable relationships refers to how different variables in a system or dataset are related or correlated to each other. These relationships can be categorized into several types. First is positive correlation. When one variable increases, the other also tends to increase. For example, as the number of hours spent studying increases, test scores tend to increase as well. Second is negative correlation. When one variable increases, the other tends to decrease. For instance, as the temperature outside increases, the sales of winter coats tends to decrease. The third is no correlation. There is no apparent relationship between the variables. Changes in one variable do not significantly affect the other. An example might be the relationship between shoe size and IQ. The fourth is causation. In some cases, one variable may cause changes in another. Establishing causation often requires more rigorous analysis and experimental design to prove a causal relationship rather than just correlation. The last is understanding variable. Relationship is crucial in statistics data analysis, and scientific research, as it helps us to make predictions, identify patterns, and draw meaningful conclusions from data.
Approximately 10 hours later.
So let's move to the other types of variable. First is intervening variables. An intervening variable is sometimes called a mediator. It's a theoretical variable that the researcher uses to explain a cause or connection between other study variables, usually the dependent and independent ones. It must be noted that intervening variables cannot be observed in an experiment, but as already intimated, can be used to explain a cause, connection, or association between and among variables in the study. Hence, intervening variables deal with associations instead of observations. For example, if wealth is the independent variable and a long lifespan is a dependent variable, then the researcher might hypothesize that access to quality healthcare is the intervening variable that links wealth and a lifespan. The second is moderating variables. A moderating or moderator variable changes the relationship between dependent and independent variable by strengthening or weakening the intervening variable's effect. For example, in a study looking at the relationship between economic status, that is independent variable, and how frequently get physical exams from a doctor, that is dependent variable. Age is a moderating variable as we can observe that relationship might be weaker in younger individuals and stronger in older individuals.
A few moments later.
Third is control variables. Control or controlling variables are characteristics and do not change during a study. It must be noted that control variables do not have effect on other variables. Now, what is the use or role of control variables in the experiments? Let us suppose that a researcher or a scientist aims to understand the effect that an independent variable has on a dependent variable. Here, control variables help ensure that the experiment results are fair, unskewed, and not caused by your experimental manipulation. Hence, researcher might intentionally keep a control variable the sum throughout an experiment to prevent bias. For example, an experiment about plant development, control variables might include the amounts of fertilizer and water each plant gets amount are always the same so that they do not affect the plant's growth. The fourth is extraneous variables. Extraneous variables are factors that affect the dependent variable but that the researcher did not originally consider when designing the experiment. These unwanted variables can unintentionally change a study's results or how a researcher interprets the results. For example, a study assessing whether private tutoring or online courses are more effective at improving students' Spanish test scores. Extraneous variables that might unintentionally influence the outcome include parental support, prior knowledge of a foreign language, or socioeconomic status.
2,000 years later.
The fifth is confounding variables. A confounding variable is a third variable in a study that influences both the independent and dependent variables. Confounding variables can invalidate your experiment's results by making them biased or suggesting a relationship between variables exists when it does not. For example, if the researcher is studying the relationship between exercise level, that is the independent variable, and body mass index, that is dependent variable, but not consider age's effect on these factors, it becomes a confounding variable that changes the results of the study. Hence, failing to account for confounding variables can cause you to wrongly estimate the relationship between your independent and dependent variables. And the last is composite variables. A composite variable is two or more variables combined to make a more complex variable. Overall, health is an example of a composite variable if a researcher uses other variables such as weight, blood pressure, and chronic pain to determine overall health in the experiment.